Hello, everyone, and inside today's Locked On Canadiens, the Montreal Canadiens acquire a former first-round pick from the Anaheim Ducks, and are we getting Xhekaj versus Reaves round two?
You are Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 1026 of Locked On Canadiens. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and remember to make every moment more, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. We are, of course, your daily Montreal Canadiens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every single day of the week, wherever you get your daily podcast, on Google, Apple, Spotify, or on YouTube.com. I am one of your hosts. I am Scott Maitland. As always, I am joined by the active stick, Laura Saba. And Laura, we do have a game and a preview that we're going to move into our second segment, and we have a trade and the trade deadline and so many things to talk about in this episode, so much that we had to make a live episode for tomorrow. So make sure you're subscribed to the Locked On Canadiens YouTube so you can catch us at 6 p.m. tomorrow for the live Eastern. Yes, the only time zone that matters. Sorry, West Coast. So sorry, JD. To recap everything that does or does not happen at the NHL trade deadline.
So as you have been doing the intro, I have also been scrolling to make sure there are no trades that are breaking while we are recording this episode. But this was a big one, and I'll let you talk about the return in just one quick second. But I will say that Jan Mysak, I should say rather, stop laughing at me, Scott. He's a common name that used to come up in our mailbag. Our listeners always wanted to talk about him. And it was a question that actually, we were asked anytime we had a prospect expert on, we were asked, for people to ask, for us to ask our experts, is there a way forward with him? Is he going to get his promise back? Have the Habs screwed him up? Has his development been screwed up? I wonder if this change of scenery will be good for him. By all accounts, he's always been a player that is beloved by the fan base, and for good reason. And I think everyone just wishes him luck. It's sad that he did not achieve his potential, at least to this point. I guess after those COVID years, after the way the development went, it just wasn't going to happen here. But I don't know if we should rule out the possibility of him finding success elsewhere. So for me, from my perspective, I'm happy for the kid. But also I think, at some point, those questions that people kept asking over and over and over and over again, they were not going to be answered in this market.
And I'm looking at this. So for everyone who wants to know what we are talking about, who, hasn't been dialed in or was smart enough to stay off the internet because you're more well-adjusted people than I am. The Canadiens, about, let's say, this afternoon-ish, announced a trade where they sent forward Jan Mysak, playing for the Laval Rocket this year, to the Anaheim Ducks organization, to San Diego, specifically for forward Jacob Perreault. And we will talk about Perreault in a second there, and why Laura and I both crumbled to dust upon reading about this trade. Mysak was actually having a pretty good season, all things considered, after kind of struggling his first full season in the AHL. He played in that COVID year, 22 games, just 2 goals, battled injuries, had a halfway decent World Juniors, and just couldn't find his footing. Last year, he only had 8 points, or he had played back for the Hamilton Bulldogs 2 years ago, and then last year only put up 9 points in 40 games. For the Rocket, battled injuries again. This year, it seemed like he kind of figured out his timing, looked a little bit quicker, was a really strong penalty killer, was a really good bottom 6 forward for this Rocket team. He stepped up, and Coach Jean-Francois Houle, promoted him up the lineup as such. But as someone pointed out on Twitter, the Canadiens have a glut of guys who can work hard, win pucks on the forecheck, and then score the occasional goal. It's, I believe it was Arpen Basu who called it, they traded a higher floor for a higher ceiling in this trade. It's sad to see him go. He was a very well-liked player. He was a guy who was having a really good year, but I like this. Jacob Perreault, 21 years old, so was Mysak. He turns 22 on April 15th, has another year left on his entry-level deal. I'm reading his 2020 draft guide on elite prospects behind me right here. Perreault is a pure sniper with one of the best shots in this draft class. It's accurate, hard, and he can score from anywhere. Ability to catch and shoot pucks in stride when the passes aren't in his wheelhouse is a transferable skill that will serve him well. This is the kind of player the Rocket have been crying out for this season after Joshua Waugh got recalled. He's got 18 points in 31 games with the San Diego Gulls this year. And those who are not in the loop fully, the Gulls are not very good. So 7 goals, 11 assists, 44 penalty minutes. He's going to be a welcome addition to this Rocket roster who needs somebody else with offensive creativity and shooting talent that is not, quite frankly, Emil Heineman. Yes, Philippe Maillet is doing pretty well in the scoring goals department. You have Brandon Gignac, who's having a very good year, but they've been screaming for another young winger to fill in the role here. Perreault is a right winger. He is going, I imagine they'll put him opposite of Sean Farrell. Farrell's been playing with Maillet in a rotating cast in there. He should fill that spot pretty nicely, should fill in on probably power play 2 with Heineman on power play 1 here. And it's a good bet on upside. And for everyone wondering why both Laura and I felt like we were crumbling to dust, Jacob Perreault is Gabriel Perreault's brother, first round pick of the New York Rangers last year, and the son of former Montreal Canadian Yanic Perreault, in case you really want to feel old. So for everyone asking how he's going to do on faceoffs, the good news is we don't got to worry about that. He is not a centerman, but I'm really interested to see kind of where this skill goes. We know he can score. He's scored Michigan goals in the AHL recently. It's a good bet on upside, and I am always in favor of a team taking that chance, especially the Rocket, who have a playoff push they need to contend with.
Scott, I did notice your immediate commentary was that this was very positive for the Rocket. He does fill a need, but I'm very intrigued about the former first round pick aspect of this. Is it a situation where maybe, again, like they are pretty prone to doing, Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton falling in love with the idea of somebody who can reclaim potential with a change of scenery, somebody who was drafted relatively high, usually like they do this with like a high second or a late first or even an early first that didn't pan out. So that's the part that intrigues me. Like, whereas for the Rocket, like I do think, it does seem like things are moving. We did talk yesterday about them appointing Sedgwick as literally the GM of the AHL, the Laval Rocket. All of these moves now, they're probably made with a lot more of his input. And it's probably a situation where he goes to the team and he says, this is what I need for my team now. And obviously the Canadiens, they struck while the iron was hot. And let's be honest, like Mysak was not, it was not going to happen here. Like, I think it was pretty clear, like even this year, there were flashes, Scott, you would report from a Rocket game or something, and I'd be like, oh, maybe he's getting it back. And the answer's always been no.
And here's the thing about Mysak is that I've liked the progression he made this year. There's scouting people that still believe in him, that he needed to get his skating together, that he has the talent there. It's just that the Canadiens have a bunch of guys who can be that bottom 6 forward. Would Jan Mysak make that role? He might have made a push if he had a good camp next year. Maybe. I'm not saying that Jacob Perreault is going to come in and immediately light the world on fire and make it to the NHL next year. But I like the idea of doing this, that maybe it's a change of scenery. He comes in, plays really well with Farrell and maybe Elias Anderson, or with Philippe Maillet or Brendan Gignac or Xavier Simino, etc. And he takes a step forward in his development, because his first year in the AHL, like first full year, it looks like the non-COVID year, 37 points in 55 games is not bad. Then a step down last year and a step down this year when the team he was playing on isn't very good. this is absolutely a change of scenery thing. And we've seen it before. They did it with Laurent Dauphin, that they traded Michael McCarron for him. And Dauphin came in and was a smash hit, became a solid NHL fourth liner in that role there. We'll see what Perreault becomes out of this. I'm always happy to watch them take a swing. And like you said, first round picks that maybe weren't making it with the team they were on originally fall right in that wheelhouse there. We've saw it with Lias Anderson, Kirby Dach. We're probably going to see it with who knows what's coming up. Alex Newhook, I completely almost forgot about that. We're going to see what Hughes has up his sleeves here. Overall, a happy trade. It's an AHL trade, so it's not inconsequential, but it has very little lasting impact going into the NHL. Speaking of the NHL, the Habs finished up their Southern road trip, and on Saturday, it is another showdown with the Leafs, and my mentions are not ready. We're going to preview that game, talk the recap of this Habs game, and more coming up next. But first, I want to talk to you about one of our brand new sponsors. Eating better is so much easier when you use Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals. I know it is so hard to sit down and have something that is good for you, quick, and when you just need it on the go. I am constantly on the road for work, and then when I come home, I don't always have time to sit down and prepare a full meal for myself. Factor has you covered. 2-minute meals. Fuel up fast with Factor's restaurant quality meals that are ready to heat and eat whenever you are. You can come home, put it in, and you're good to go. There's no prep, no mess. It's so easy. You literally just heat it and it is good to go, and it is flexible to your schedule. You need it for breakfast, put it in there. You need a midday snack, you're good to go. You need something for dinner, Factor has you covered. And sign up and save now because we've done the math. Factor is less expensive than takeout, and every meal is dietitian approved to be nutritious and delicious. So head to factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 to get 50% off. That's code LockedOnNHL50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 to get 50% off today. We are back here at Locked On Canadiens, and it is Thursday night. It is less than, I'm trying to do the math here. The trade deadline ends at 3 p.m. tomorrow. 17 hours until the NHL trade deadline. Poor Pete Blackburn is doing a 24-hour stream, and I think he's insane because he's going to be delirious by the time actual trade starts happening.
We're only doing 1 hour, and I'm already exhausted thinking about it.
Yeah, at least we get to do it afterwards so we know what happened. We're not trying to fill content time in there because I don't think I could do 24 hours awake in this, not without being able to figure out how I could stream video games on this. But the Habs, should we start with the game that the Habs played tonight, Laura, before we get into the actual fun stuff this weekend?
Yes, let's talk about the game against the Carolina Hurricanes, a team you and I both have adored since its existence.
Yeah. Anyways, Carolina's boring. I have never seen a team have the puck so much and try and do so little with it all the time. It actually boggles the mind that they won 4-1. This was a game that the Habs were tied with them for most of it and were down by 1 goal until like the very end of the third period. And I think in this one is that the Canadiens got the opening goal, looked halfway decent. They were there stride for stride with them. And then the quality and roster difference started to make a difference. The Canadiens were getting hemmed in more often, not getting the puck out. And then in that, having to take these long shifts, take penalties. And then they have to kill the penalties and they bleed the time off the clock. And it was just like watching a boa constrictor just slowly squeeze the life out of the Canadiens. The Habs had every chance to blow this game open. They had power plays when they were tied, power plays when they had a chance to tie the game up. They hit 3 posts in this game, and it's just the quality was not there for them. Frederik Andersen was extremely lucky, and an incredible goal from Joshua Waugh got wiped out because Josh Anderson is a lot of things. Good at hockey currently is not one of them. It's a frustrating game because this is a kind of a preview for what the next month and a half is going to be. Well, they were close until they weren't. So it is the most frustrating time of year because the trade deadline's great because a lot of things can happen here. But afterwards, there's going to be a lot of games like this. The Habs have one of the hardest strengths of schedule left. You're going to see this a lot.
Honestly, if the Habs were even close to being a bubble team, I think it was rigged. Like, I don't want to be that guy, but I like truly, like, how is it possible that in a situation where this team would be fighting for a playoff spot, these are all their opponents for the rest of the year?
And I think that if they can keep pace in these games, because that's the website I want to bring up Tankathon here, because I want to look at the strength of schedule here. Remaining strength of schedule. The Canadiens still have the hardest schedule left. A 597 strength of schedule. The next closest is Buffalo at 586, Washington, New Jersey, Florida, like all the way down at the bottom is Minnesota, just barely over 500. But they have a game against the Panthers, a game against the Bruins, a game against the Canucks, a game against the Rangers, another game against Carolina, a game against Colorado. Their easy games are considered the Lightning and the Flames, which
Speaking of the Flames, I can't wait to talk about them at tomorrow's trade deadline wrap-up show.
There's a lot to talk about in there about the job Craig Conroy is or is not doing at that. Oh, we have 2 games against Toronto left, who are somehow listed as not our toughest or easiest opponents, which just absolutely don't love that at all. I guess we're going to go into that. The Canadiens lost this game 4-1. It is what it is. We're waiting on Michael Bunting to be traded from the French Revolution to Pittsburgh because Kyle Dubas is a lot of things, which I cannot wait to pick that apart. That is not a time for the show because that trade hasn't come through yet, so I can't make fun of someone who hasn't fully made the trade yet. But let's transition to this weekend here. It's the first game against the Leafs since, was that opening night that the Canadiens and Leafs played this year in Toronto? All the talk about Matt Rempe around the NHL and him finally fighting Ryan Reaves in the last game. Everyone seems to have forgotten where this whole who's going to fight who kind of nonsense started this season in game 1 when all eyes were on Arber, Xhekaj, and Ryan Reaves. And round 1 went to Arber, Xhekaj. Reaves hit Gooley from behind, which was not penalized, but that's several months in the past. Can't get mad about that. Xhekaj took it to him, tossed him over the back of the net.
And then we talked about it for 3 months.
It's all anyone talks about at this point, really. And it's all I can think is it's going to happen again. And if I am the Canadiens, and I'm not saying that I don't want Arber, Xhekaj to stand up for himself, ignore a guy who plays 5 minutes a night. You are Arber, Xhekaj. You know that you are the toughest guy on the ice at any given time. You have beaten him up once, and you still managed to play, 16, 17 minutes a night, maybe more, on the Canadiens' blue line. You have talent that is not stuck in your fists hitting other people's face. This is a guy who does not play every game, there are periods that he doesn't play at all because he can't do anything else. If he goes and he takes a run at somebody, yeah, you take the gloves off and you beat him up. So like, then you do what you gotta do. But I would, and I know people are gonna think that this is me like cheaping out and being soft or whatever. I would rather our young up and coming, defensemen not spend 5 minutes in the box for fighting a guy as a showdown thing who doesn't do anything for the team that he is on. Call me nuts in that. Like, if this is a planned, squared off thing, I think it's a waste of time. If he throws a hit that you don't like, that's one thing. But if he's chasing you around, trying to, get you to going, let him be stupid because he's focused on that instead of the thing that he's paid. Well, he's paid money to fight people, but he can't do that because he's old, decrepit, and sucks at hockey. But let him waste his time focused on you when there are other people on the ice, to be quite honest. I know Toronto is very likely to win this game. They should. Austin Matthews is scoring at a historic pace. William Nylander is good. John Tavares is there. I don't want, if this is the narrative that's going to dominate it means Toronto has learned all the wrong lessons this season. They're focused so much on being tough that they're going to ignore everything else. Whatever, fine. I realize I've been talking for a while because everyone knows I love talking about the whole fighting and aspect and hockey stuff. So I apologize for that, Laura.
Honestly, don't apologize. Like it is something that like gets people stirred up, including myself. It's just that you're so much better at talking about it. But at the same time, like this is a Saturday night matchup against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like it's always a classic, and it would be a shame if it was ruined by nonsense and stupidity. Like honestly, it's been a long time since I can remember a game where it was just like a good game, right? Like again, between these two teams. It's always, even when the Canadiens win, even when the Canadiens are in the Leafs' head, even when it was 3-1, even when it was haunted, whatever it is, like it just always feels like there's so much drama surrounding the game and not enough like game, if that makes sense.
And I think that's it, is that it's the fun part of this is going to be is that if the Habs win this game, it's going to be a talk. There will be a talk about toughness or something stupid and ridiculous, because that's always how this goes. And if the Habs lose, we're going to hear about how the new identity of the Leafs led the way, not the fact that they have a mutant freak for a goal scorer instead, and they're playing a team that has a line and a half of quality NHL players. But narratives are narratives. It's going to be ridiculous. It's going to be a toxic sludge pool on Twitter, which just don't. But also, it's Saturday night. It's hockey night in Canada. It's the Habs and the Leafs. It is quite possibly the most romantic you can be about hockey without this being in the playoffs. And if it was in the playoffs, we already know how that goes between these two teams anyways. And spoiler alert, it's very funny if you're a Habs fan. So we will have the recap of that next week. I'm sure it's going to be very lightly discussed by the time we get into Monday's episode. But it is Friday. That means the mailbag. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the more trade stuff and what's looming at the deadline, some news, and that's all coming up next. But first, today's show is also brought to you by the folks at Indeed. No matter how your last game went, anytime you take the field, you've got a shot at greatness. So give your team the best shot at winning by recruiting more MVPs with Indeed. Because if you're hiring, you need Indeed, because Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Last year, I went through the whole job searching process, and it can be an absolute nightmare, and Indeed makes it a snap, because I uploaded my resume, my cover letter, and within a day I had people asking, are you interested in this? And it is so easy to find the best possible candidates for what you need. And Indeed makes it easy to hire the great talent, because according to ComScore, Indeed is the #1 job site in the world. So if you want to start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit, just go to Indeed.com/lockedon with an offer valid through March 31st. That is Indeed.com/lockedon to claim your $75 credit before March 31st. That is Indeed.com/LOCKEDON. Terms and conditions apply. And if you need to hire, you need Indeed. And indeed, we have finally, when you were listening to this, we've approached the day of the NHL trade deadline. It is on a Friday, which is delightful for everybody who can work from home or has the option to, or just wanted to make a 3-day weekend for whatever reason. We did get some Habs news today. There was Habs news during the first intermission of the Habs Hurricanes game. Pierre LeBrun was asked, what are the Canadiens going to do? And the thought is probably not much. A lot of teams have said, we're not interested in Jake Allen right now. We want to circle back in the summer when he is down another year on his contract, when the cap has risen a little bit. And my thought is we're going to see again who gets desperate on the goaltending front when someone like Jacob Markstrom or Linus Ullmark potentially are moved for whatever reason. And I don't think Ullmark's going anywhere, mind you, for the Bruins, but it seems like a lot of things are pointing that the Habs are going to be big players this summertime. David Savard was the same thing. Teams like David Savard, but they also like him with 1 year as a pure rental or long-term rental versus 2 years or year and whatever's left of this contract this year going into next year. And for Tanner Pearson, it's the Habs are, looking, they're seeing what they can do, but there's not a lot of fish biting at this point. And for a lot of these guys, I think the value is maybe not where we expected it was going to be. I think things can change very rapidly here. I think that the Canadiens are going to be quiet throughout the morning, when things kick off. And then as we hit that like 12:30, 1 o'clock window where things just start hammering in at once, right down to the deadline, is when people are going to start calling Ken Hughes. We missed out on trade target A or trade target B. Can we circle back on David Savard here? And the asking price for guys is, as according to LeBron and other people, is high. Ken Hughes put a premium value on his players. That means quieter deadline now, but if he gets what he wants in the summertime, are we upset about that? Are we upset if they get more in the summertime because there's a year off that contract? And the other news was that the Habs were approached to be a broker in some of those three-way trades over the last 48 hours. They turned down the offer in both of those, according to Pierre LeBrun, because they wanted to keep that retention spot open for Friday, whether that be for their own players or as another three-way trade broker. And that, I think, is smart. I think that the price that they got there, like a third or a fourth round pick, if they can get more out of that, if they can make a first round pick trade happen, God forbid, for David Savard, and they have to retain a little bit and they kept that slot open, I think that's smart from Ken Hughes.
Yeah, I think that was the right move. And obviously, we will recap everything to do with the trade deadline on a live show tomorrow. If you miss it, or if you are not subscribed to our YouTube, well, first of all, why? Second of all, if you are not able to make it, we will post it as a bonus episode, both on our audio and our video feeds as soon as we're done. Just a big note though, the audio won't be live. So if you want to catch us live, you have to subscribe to our YouTube and join us. All right, Scott, are we ready for a couple of mailbag questions?
I don't see why not.
Yeah, I'm only going to do two because there was one from Randy Hansen asking about the trade deadline overall, and we're going to save that tomorrow for a special guest, Ian Boisvert. This one comes from Boondoggle, and it assumes that neither goalie gets traded. So the Canadiens continue to finish the season out with all three of Montembeault, Allen, and Primo. Should the Habs start cutting Montembeault's starts to play Primo and Allen more? I think Monty should play all the Saturday night home games because he's earned that privilege, but with 21 games left, it seems like a good time to make Allen and Primo each play some consecutive games. The tougher schedule will be a good litmus test to figure out who will be next year's backup. And the Boondoggle finishes by saying, I'm not confident either will be traded before the summer. So that's also a thought. So, Scott, thoughts?
You play your starter. Samuel Montembeault is your starting goaltender. Play your starting goaltender because he deserves to have those starts. And here's the thing is, if they want to play Primo more, I think that signals what they think is going to happen. My thought is still if a goalie gets moved tomorrow, it's going to be Caden Primo, not Jake Allen, just because of his cheaper overall contract and a little bit more term on it for a younger guy who hasn't played bad this year. I think that you give Montembeault his regular starting thing there. And if you have all three goalies, you kind of keep cycling them through there. And if Allen has, a stretch of bad games, give Primo more starts then. If he loses, who the hell cares? You're going for a higher draft pick anyways. And I'd rather see what Primo's level is in the NHL versus Jake Allen, who we're watching that level kind of shift down ever so slightly.
A question about the AHL trade we talked about. Do you think this was driven by Sedgwick or Hughes?
I think this was I don't think John Sedgwick had immediately got this job and was like, I'm calling up Anaheim. I think this has probably been negotiated a little bit already. I think after the trade the Ducks made the other day where they shipped Adam Henrique out, maybe Hughes was approached as part of brokering, and part of that they looked at things and went, maybe they asked for Jacob Perreault directly, and they were told no in that, but they came back with a trade just swapping prospects for that. It's not that I don't think that John Sedgwick had a hand in this. He was probably brought in as part of this, looking at the way that he manages the Rocket roster. They probably asked him, what do we need in the AHL? And they said, we need a skill guy. We need another scoring forward. And that, gets passed along to Hughes as they negotiate these kind of things. It's rare that AHL GMs are usually exchanging AHL contracts with each other, not entry-level deals, which are still NHL contracts. I think that's done still up from the top level in the NHL there. So I know we have other questions.
We're just out of time.
Yes, we are out of time. And for those who know me, my internet is not cooperating, which is always a fun thing to do. So guess what, everybody? You need to tune in tomorrow. Subscribe to Locked On Canadiens on YouTube. Live stream, 6 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to be talking about the trade deadline.
With our guest.
With our guest, Ian Boisvert, with the Noah Hanifin trade that has the world's most insane condition on a first-round pick I've ever seen. The Gensel trade that may or may not happen. So much is coming. Follow us on Twitter at LO_Canadiens. LockedOnCanadiens@gmail.com. If you have questions you want answered on the live stream tomorrow, if you can't make it, just send it to us. We always want to hear from you. Follow Laura at The Active Stick. Follow myself at Scott Madeline. Everybody, we will see you all next time.